Hope you guys have been enjoying the festival so far. And I was fascinated in the last session that I came here to listen to Jack Sims talking about the importance of bathrooms. And I know that a lot of the women here have been lining up forever. I don't know whether you heard the logic in which Jack Sims presented it. Jack Sims was responsible for changing the law in Singapore and in China. And basically he said it takes 30 seconds for us to pee, for the men to pee, because we have urinals, but it takes women 1 minute, and therefore you need more cubicles for women, because if you add up the 1 minute plus waiting time, as you do in here at this venue, look at the amount of loss of economic work in that period. And Singapore and China sort of changed the law. But absolutely welcome to everybody. I have three fascinating people. Mukulika Banerjee is from the London School of Economics. Everybody knows the London School of Economics? Anybody studied at the London School of Economics here? Mukulika? Outreach is not so good.
We're not working hard enough.
Professor Somak Raychaudhury is the Vice-Chancellor of Ashoka University. Anybody knows Ashoka University in India? Anybody studied at the Ashoka University? One. Oh, fantastic. Welcome. Oh, two. Amazing. And Professor Santiago is the Vice-Chancellor of the IE University in Madrid. Most of you wouldn't have heard of it. Anybody heard of it? Oh, wow. That's amazing. Well, welcome. I'm going to start with Professor Santiago, and I'm going to ask each of them a series of questions. Professor, the IE University, at least the first time that you invited us, which was last year, I arrive in Madrid. And how many of you have been to Madrid? Madrid, yeah. So you remember when you go and you see in the center of town the 5 tall towers in Madrid, which is their city center? So IE University is one of those 5 towers. Totally technology works there. It's drop dead. And then when you go up with him to the top floor and look out at the city, it's amazing. In a very short period of time, Professor, the IE University, I think 16 years or 17 years, you've created a global reputation. What did you do right? How did you become a place that has attracted so many people, including students from India?
Indeed, and we currently have actually on campus 300 participants from India across all our different programs. And the short answer to your question is the quality of the people. We are a university that was founded by entrepreneurs, that trains entrepreneurs, because we have a very high ratio of graduates that actually decide to set up their own companies. And this entrepreneurial spirit is very much present across the profile of all the different stakeholders of IE. But going back to your question, because when I look back, we're just 17 years old. You're actually younger, your university is even younger. But when I think about LSE and other centennial universities, I feel a little vertigo. And the fact is that the answer, to your question, what is the secret of building up a solid, reputed institution, is actually the quality of the people, the quality of the students that we attract, the quality of the faculty, the quality of the staff. And when I say this, probably I don't mean the same to what some other institutions mean by quality, because we may have different missions. Our institution is very entrepreneurial, very oriented towards the market, very closely linked with companies, with organizations, whereas some other institutions may be more academic-oriented. We are based in Madrid, which is becoming, a very lively capital worldwide, and we are attracting many different international participants. In fact, we have 140 nationalities on campus, and the percentage of foreign students across programs on average is over 95%. Of course, the language of delivery is English, and we are very, proud of attracting that pool of international participants. So international orientation, entrepreneurial spirit, and being very close to the market.
I'm going to come to the affordability of universities next round, but Professor Raychaudhury, tell me, you're 10 years old, Ashoka. Today, if you go to the United States and you talk to universities there, the one university that continues to be recognized outside of the IITs and IIMs and perhaps Delhi University is Ashoka. And it didn't happen today after 10 years, it happened after 5 years. What did you get right?
Well, thanks very much. I think Ashoka happened at a time when the time was right for it to happen. It was a concept for which the time had come. A bunch of entrepreneurs got together, and now that number has risen to 200. They put their effort and money behind a concept that is quite rare. I mean, normally entrepreneurs put their effort behind engineering universities or law universities, professional universities. This is a liberal arts and sciences universities. But the idea was that, as you say, education is at a crossroads. We need to rethink education. We need to make education skills-based and based on critical thinking rather than the subjects themselves. And the idea was right. So the idea was that students would come in not committing to a subject, quite new in India, and actually spend 3 semesters exploring skills and general courses, things like critical thinking, things like basic Indian history, things like economics and politics, and principles of science, and quantitative methods, and things like that. And then finally make up their mind about what they wanted to do. Now, this has been in the US, in the liberal arts system for a very long time. But in India, this was new. And the idea was then they are being taught by people who are at the forefront of their game. They're research active people, which is also unusual in India. The two worked together very, very well. And as students came in, they realized that the freedom they get in the first year to make up their own mind rather than being pushed into subjects was actually liberating for them. And that made our students become very successful in life. And so the students that have come out of Ashoka, we are very proud to know that they're all over the world. They're getting the top scholarships in the world. They're getting the top jobs all over India and the world. And that's because of not just the quality of education, but also the kind of education that we lay out for them. I can talk more about this, but as I said, the concept is new and the concept has worked.
Mukulika, professor talked about rethinking education. In the example of the London School of Economics, 100 years plus, it's been around. What's the kind of rethinking that you've had to do? After all, you've been host to the children of tyrants and the children of great democrats and thinkers. What have you done in many ways to change the idea of thinking and to be able to look at a better future?
Okay, so when LSE was set up in 1895, there was a very clear USP they had in mind. 4 people, Sidney and Beatrice Webb, the economists, George Bernard Shaw, and Graham Wallas. The 4 of them got together. They were linked to the Fabian Society. And they felt there was a need for a university that would produce knowledge that would make the world a better place. Which is to say that there was a built-in policy angle to what that knowledge that you produced in a university, whether it would benefit society, that it was. So this was kind of baked into the inception of it. It should be said, when I worked at UCL before that for many years, and when UCL was set up in the early 19th century, it was in the middle of the 19th century, that's right. London was the only capital in Europe that did not have a university. All other capitals had universities, including Madrid, and there was only Oxford and Cambridge. So UCL already had reimagined it. UCL had, and it set up its medical sciences and engineering. It was a university in a traditional mold. That's why when LSE was set up, it was set up as a social science university. It continues to remain a social science university. So in some senses, you're talking about what's there in the design that makes it successful. There's a coherence. There are 25 disciplines, many research centers, equal number of research centers. But there is our motto is to know the causes of things. So you're thinking about big theoretical, philosophical issues to do with society, whether you're an economist, whether you're an anthropologist like I am, a political scientist, a philosopher, we have a mathematics department. But ultimately the goal is to produce knowledge that also should engage, right? And for that, I think LSE is fairly unique in the UK and certainly in London for having the most lively public events program. So, JLF is wonderful, and I get a taste of that spirit of JLF every evening practically at LSE, because every evening there's a terrific public events program where, world leaders, scholars, Nobel laureates come through curated sessions in conversations with LSE academics, and all kinds of people. It's totally free and it's totally open to everyone. So
Santiago produces knowledge that engage. Yet today we are seeing the present narrative is that you go to university and you drop out, you set up a startup in your garage, and you become a multi-billionaire, which everybody here aspires to be. Why do they need to go to the university if they can just go and set up in a garage?
Well, we have lots of entrepreneurs actually on campus who decide to set up their own companies on the first year of their undergraduate studies. The main reason, for going to universities is actually getting the preparation, the education that may make them become committed global citizens. Joining a degree is not just a question of getting all the hard skills, the tools for joining a job at the end of their studies. University studies actually provide you with a very wide vision of the world. They instill the virtues, the classical virtues that education actually conveys. It's also intended, to form the character. So I wouldn't actually encourage youngsters to join companies, as some entrepreneurs actually do. I think that's an error, because they miss an essential time in their lives to form up their personalities, become, that global citizens, and meet also some other people. It's the experience that counts. It's not actually the knowledge that you learn. So there's also the opportunity, of course, of working at the same time as you attend studies. So there's many different formula, but my advice would be become an entrepreneur and talk to your university so that you can actually attend a very flexible scheme and complete your degree.
Professor Somak, you are a physicist, and you've taught both in the UK, you've come to India, you've been in Pune, you've been at Presidency College, etc. What do you see the role? I mean, there's this divide between the arts and the sciences, right? I mean, people like me would never be allowed into the sciences, but people like you are part of the sciences. Is this an artificial divide? Don't we need the arts to look beyond, think out of the box, look at new innovation? And don't we need the sciences equally to look and make possible what you're being able to envision, like 2001 Space Odyssey did about space travel? How can you bring this together, and why do we have this divide today?
The division between the arts and sciences is less than 200 years old. When Newton went to Cambridge and to study his undergraduate degree, he would have studied theology, he would have studied mathematics, astronomy, law, and architecture, everything all together. When we had Nalanda and Takshashila teach in India in 7th or 8th century, that was the kind of menu. I am a BA in physics from Oxford. There is no division between the arts and the sciences at the basic level. The compartmentalization was done in the 1850s and 1860s in Oxford and Cambridge. They set up subjects and made specialized approaches to subjects. However, and people got more and more specialized in these silos. I think you would see that in the inaugural speech of this festival, Dr. Venki Ramakrishnan made a very, very important point, which we should revisit. The idea is that without the humanities, science is totally blind. If you are looking at the advances of science, look at AI happening now, look at the controversies to do with cloning and genetics and new drugs, vaccinations, all the big wins that science has had in the last few decades have all been tempered by considerations that have come from the humanities and social sciences. You have to worry about the ethics of what you're doing. You have to worry about the political and economic context of what you're doing. And without that context, without that veneer, of knowing the philosophy and history behind what you're doing, it is absolutely essential to know in order to go forward with science. And so this artificial divide between the sciences and the humanities and the social sciences is not only artificial and should be taken away, but moving beyond these crossroads phenomenon that we have now, it is absolutely relevant. We now are in a situation where education has to change inexorably. And that is because when we went to college, we were gathering information from textbooks. We were pursuing textbooks. We wanted information, and the teachers were teaching us the information. Now, information is everywhere. And so what you have to do is to understand that information, the implications of that information, and to separate the good from the bad. And in that, there is no science, no humanities, no social sciences. Everything has to come together. And this is why, at Ashoka, for example, we have this approach where everybody has to do these foundation courses in which we are bringing together everything like this. So we have students who have to attend the courses on the ethics of AI. When I teach astronomy, I teach it in the context of history and of philosophy and of psychology. And they all come together. And when people see this, beginning at age 18, starting to look at education in this light, then as they specialize and learn more and more, go deeper and deeper in their subjects, they know exactly where to look for associated information. That is very important.
Mukulika, Dr. Santiago talked about going to university because it's a way of life, because it's the conversations that you have, not necessarily, as Professor Somak said, in the classroom or what you're being taught, but the experience that you have collectively in a university. I know that when I was in St. Stephen's for the first year, most of my time I spent protesting or in jail or wherever I was, rather than going to class. Tell me what's the role of protest by students in universities, both Ashoka, the LSE, I don't know about IE, in recent times have been roiled by protests. In our time, it was seen as a must-do. Today, that world has changed. Is there a value today for students to question power? And how can they do it?
What a brilliant question, Sanjoy. Thank you. And thank you for creating the space to have this conversation, because I think many of us talk about this. First thing, before I answer your question directly, one thing has to be said, that universities, like you say, are creating citizens. And regardless of what you study, whatever discipline you're studying, the university is a space where never again in life will you have the time and the spaces to do things with people you don't know. So whether you're playing in a band, whether you're doing a play, whether you're organizing a rubbish collection or recycling, you're learning to work with other people, right? And therefore, the heart of democracy, right, is about learning to accommodate, learning to deliberate with people, learning to disagree, learning that face-to-face interaction with people you don't like, but learn to work together with them. That kind of cooperation is absolutely at the heart of alliance building of any sort. So the university is unique in creating that potentiality for democratic citizens. In that context, students, I was in DO a few years after you, but that's exactly I went to demonstrations with my professors. My professors were the ones protesting about various things, and I learned how to go on a demonstration with them. Student protests now on campus are happening in a different grammar. It's not always in the streets of a city. They're often within campuses. There are often protests about issues outside in society. There are often protests about issues within the campus against university management. This has happened at LSE. It has happened recently at Ashoka. And there, I think, as academics, of course, students should learn to protest, because the young have a sense of right and wrong, which they feel very deeply. I have a huge amount of respect for that. And they're willing to put their bodies, their energies, their time into organizing, learning to work with other people, making posters, etc. As academic faculty, I think we also have a role when students protest. We have our own politics. I go on demonstrations. I've marched through central London every other Saturday protesting against the genocide in Gaza for the last year. I have my own politics. But when I'm on campus and students are protesting, I think my job as an academic is not to take a political position that is my own. It's apparent, it's in my writings, it's in my actions. But as a member of faculty, we have a responsibility for being able to create conversations. There are students who protest, there are other students who think it's fine. But often the students who protest are way louder, better organized than the students who may disagree. Are all voices being heard? Are we able to create dialogue? If you're protesting against university management and leadership, academic leadership, thank goodness, like Professor Somak here, is drawn from academics. It's not gone the way like in the US, where the whole managerial class of United States universities is drawn from non-academics. They're fund managers, really. Whereas in the universities we are discussing, leadership is coming from amongst academic faculty themselves. So there has to be place for conversation and dialogue. That is what I think student protests are about.
Professor Santiago, certainly my life has been shaped by my teachers, both in school and at university. And every time I took issue with the powers that be or the leadership in the university or my college, they were there to support me. With the advent of technology, as we saw especially during COVID, you had this sort of sudden fracture between this personalized exchange of energy and advice between professor and student. The blank Zoom wall, because everybody had their Zooms off, was, I think, the most off-putting thing, and I stopped giving lectures, as I did to many universities whose boards I sit on, or whose advisory councils I sit on. How will this change the way that we put out knowledge? What then is the role of universities with technology moving in the way that it is, fully accessible by everybody? And all kinds of knowledge, both good knowledge, and I'm making a value judgment here, as well as knowledge that may not be appropriate for a person at that point of time.
Allow me just one quick comment. No? Two comments actually about your previous contributions. The first one, partying is of course part of the experience. So I very much encourage, young students to party, to network. Another comment, and I realize that many of our campuses now are very diverse in terms of the composition of their students. I have 140 different nationalities on campus, so you can imagine the different clashes that we encounter, sometimes reflecting all the conflicts that we find globally. And I got to the conclusion as president of this university, since I have to meet the needs of many different stakeholders. Of course, we have to instill in students those critical thinking skills that may make them become very committed global citizens. But at the same time, I have to deal with their parents. I have to deal with recruiters, with donors, with many different, the faculty itself, as you were mentioning. And I came to the conclusion that I cannot make political statements myself. I cannot support or make any statement regarding calamities, conflicts anymore, because it's very difficult to say anything without taking sides. No? So, but anyway, responding to your question more quickly, AI, the genius has taken outside the bottle. So it's impossible actually to close the bottle anymore. And what we have to do is actually, surf the wave in the best possible way we can. Our young students are already using ChatGPT or DeepSeek or any other AI device in order to make their homework and write their essays. So we need to instill in them reading and writing skills that make them become more creative, more thinking outside the box or even without a box. But the main challenge for universities and for our faculty is actually how to become the orchestrators of the learning process. So we are, for example, now arranging licenses of ChatGPT for all the faculty members so that we can actually use all those technologies for the best of the learning. I use avatars in my course. I'm now teaching strategy I'm here, in Jaipur, but I'm teaching online and using avatars and using AI tutors and AI assistant professors. So this is going to become the rule probably in the coming months. And I very much, encourage to embrace the technology because it's actually a friend, not a foe.
Friend, not a foe. Somak, I'm coming to you. Genie's out of the bottle. What is it that you feel that we need to tweak, or what is it that you feel that we need to change in our education policy to be able to face the challenges of the future? That's one part of the question. The second is, we're seeing the coming into India of many international universities. Gujarat's gift city or Ahmedabad's gift city is now embracing universities from outside. Is that a challenge? Is that a threat? Is that an opportunity? Can we in India change the way in which we look at university education?
I'll combine your last two questions to address the first point. I think every setback is an opportunity. And I think the setback of COVID gave us the opportunity of online education, which there were lots of things that we devised during that time just to cope with. Led to tedium, but a few years on, we can see the opportunity. So right now, in order to internationalize our system and our education, we are using the opportunities given to us by online teaching in a big way. Across the world, there are classrooms being set up where part of the class is in Hawaii, another part is in Guntur, right? And they are working together and they are learning from the same teachers. That kind of stuff has to happen. We have to learn from each other. And you will find this kind of distributed hybrid teaching in a big way. And it'll become exciting. It won't be the tedious stuff that we did. And the other thing is, I think another thing that is generally ignored, but I think a lot of people here in the audience will resonate to this. Education is not going to be confined to 18 to 22-year-olds in universities anymore. We've seen in our lifetime so much change, so much technology change happened, so much knowledge being changed, that we have to update our status of education and skills every decade or every 2 decades. And I think we have to bring in ways of educating our middle-aged people and people who are in their 40s and 50s and 60s just to update on what's happening. And in that, I think this online education, hybrid education will play a very, very important role. All of us have to come together and make sure how we can have continuing education all through our lives, right? Within a particular community, within a particular subject, but all across the world. This is bound to happen, and without online education, that cannot happen. The second point, I think, is also very, very important. I think in the internationalization of education, universities have to come together. I'm not so threatened by universities coming to India, because there are enough universities in India that are trying to cater to the population. We just heard from the economic expectations in the budget yesterday that we are going to go towards a gross enrollment ratio of 100%. Right now it's 28%. Where are the universities who are going to teach these people?
Or the schools. Or the schools.
Right. And so where are they? And so we have to come together globally to have efforts to do this. I think what will happen is that the influx of universities coming into India or schools coming into India will work with us to create a system that works. Right now, we'll have to go through a few years of learning to cope with each other and figuring out what we want to do.
I'm going to open it up in a second, so keep your questions ready. Mukulika, continuing education throughout. When you and I were in school or university, we had the most deathly boring books that we were reading, or the most deathly boring math or science teachers. We didn't have the Priyambada Natarajans talking about or writing about astrophysics and black holes, or the Venki Ramakrishnans talking about the genome. We didn't have the Stephen Greenblatts and the William Dalrymples talking about either literature or history. In this effort to be able to create continuing learning, where is the role of this new content? Is there enough of it? Look at the Jaipur Literature Festival. It is about continued learning. We receive young people, 80% of our 500,000 people who come through our doors are young. across our digital reach, 25 million people who reach, we think are also young, but also much older generation. And we need to give them stuff that works for them. How do we do that within the university system?
I think there is a problem at the heart of this, which is that any university academic who has to build a career in a university has to have a certain style of writing that has to be published in certain kinds of journals that are refereed, and therefore it makes it less readable, more academic, less accessible to a non-academic audience. Students are trained in that language. That is the specialist knowledge you get. Now that's okay, you can do that with your undergraduates, but you can't do it with continuing education. Extended education is a whole different ballgame. And if universities are to play a role in it, and LSE I know is very committed to it, we have all kinds of executive courses and summer school and so on, where the kind of language and the kind of issues you teach with, you can't teach a course on anthropology of X, right? I'm teaching a course this summer school, it had to be attractive. So I'm teaching a course on food. Now, through food, I can talk about slavery, colonialism, trade, diaspora, food disorders, medical stuff, food is medicine. But the hook, and I'm doing this as an academic, it's requiring a whole new skill set, which is different to the skill set I use inside the classroom. So unless academics are willing to equip themselves to speak this other language, engage in a different way, and write in a different way, we are not going to get that audience. But it is impossible. We are pretty overworked and underpaid as it is. So.
I mean, my own belief is that every academic or every teacher should enroll in a theater class to be able to be much more exciting to their students, but I leave that as a thought to them. Questions? Yeah, the first one here, right here.
Oh my God, what a phenomenal session, firstly.
Questions, because we
yes.
have 6 minutes and...
Okay, my question's to Somak. I want to ask you about the BA plus physicist. Super curious to tell me about how was that course and what does that entail? Like you said, you have a BA in physics? Yeah, never heard of it.
So hold that, Somak, hold that. We'll take a cluster of questions. So BA course, BA in physics, how does that work? Let's go to the young gentleman. I'm going to give it preference to the, stand.
Hey, hi. My question is to actually all of you. How do you incorporate the importance of CSR in your ESG activities from an educational point of view? What
CSR and ESG activities, the gentleman in front.
My question to the panel is, should we have compulsory internships as part of the curriculum annually?
So compulsory internships, ESG activity, and CSR, and of course, BA physics. What does that mean?
Well, I have a BA in physics because I did in the University of Oxford, which does not have any other degrees. It is a BA. The recognition being that everything that you teach is of the same caliber. You don't need to actually break them up into silos. In fact, a few years before I did my degree, it was called the BA in Natural Philosophy. The fact that the natural philosophy and physics are the same thing shows the content of the course actually recognizing the fact that physics is not a subject that is so specialized that it cannot talk with anybody else. And that's the kind of education that I'm quite familiar with, and that's exactly what we're doing in Ashoka. When I teach a course in the first year, and I do teach, my course is attended by anybody who's doing any other subject. And I, for example, would teach a course on time, which I taught last semester, where I talk about the physics of time, but I also talk about the biology of time. I talk about the perception of time for psychologists. We talk about time as it is done in philosophy, both in ancient philosophy and current philosophy, and we bring it all together and we discuss it all at the same time. And this is basically a course in physics, right? So that's the kind of approach I think we need to move forward, because we are getting too subject-centric. We need to get idea-centric and skill-centric.
Do you want to take the ESG and CSR question?
Sure. My approach, to CSR, I mean, given that I'm actually a moral philosopher, my PhD is in moral philosophy, is that instead of confining the subject to some particular course, it should permeate, all the different courses of a degree. Because in the end, what we understand by a good manager, an ethical manager, is actually equivalent, of being a good manager in terms of, the way you practice management. It's something very similar to what is applicable to doctors. What we say, how we understand what is an ethical doctor, a doctor of medicine. We understand that being ethics in medicine entails saving lives and practicing medicine in the best possible way. So this is actually applicable to management, architecture. Good architects should project their buildings in time and budget, and don't pass, as some starry architects do, the budget, by 10 times. So I don't see, that ethics or CSR is something different from what we call deontology. Being a very good professional and practicing your job in the best possible way.
Mukulika, should internship be compulsory?
It depends on which country. And I think about this a lot. I think, yes, I can see why you're saying this. Experience of working in the outside world is very important. No. But a first degree is not very long. It's quite nice to have 3 to 4 years to read, to reflect, to do theater, to develop a sporting skill.
To protest?
To protest, to do those other things, because never again in life, once you enter a working career, you don't have it. So I think it's quite important. Besides, in a country like India, if you can't, this can't be top down. Students should want it. And if they should want it, there has to be a democratized way. It is already such an elitist society. You can see how the old boys network, the rich kids get the internships in the flashy companies. How do you democratize access of work to different kinds of companies? Companies have to be willing to run some sort of competitive, fair entry programs. It can't be mommy and daddy's friends.
And to, of course, love. Yes, the gentleman with the glasses in the 4th row, and then the lady from Ashoka. 2 questions. I'm sorry we've run out of time. Go ahead.
Hi. As a school owner, I wanted to know that universities act as a bridge between school students and the industry. What would be your one top skill that you would want in school students that the schools must teach?
One top skill from a school student that, yeah.
I think on the question of internship, something I've been hearing throughout bachelor's and become a
Question.
Yeah. What is the role of this thought of getting ROI on undergraduate education, or like wanting to directly do a job after bachelor's and treating your undergrad education in terms of the fees and the placement you're getting out of it?
Who wants to take that?
Can I ask the first question? Answer the first question. The first question, I think the basic skill that one needs to bring out of schools for later employability and survival is communication, I think. I think a lot of students, because the way we teach in schools and in all education institutions is a one-way education. Teachers talk to students, students don't talk back. As a result, communication skills are hampered in a big way. And in real life, it is very important for people to actually communicate what they understand, communicate their ideas, and also relate to other people's ideas. So this is something that is totally missing in our education.
Return on investment, Santiago?
I would add actually that there's many different forms of intelligence. So at university you can actually practice, and enhance your analytical skills, the typical, analytical intelligence, but also emotional intelligence, which is key, spatial intelligence. So I would very much emphasize, the importance of many different social skills that have to do with succeeding later in life, Most managers, the successful managers, are the ones that have more emotional intelligence rather than being geniuses.
One last question, the gentleman with the glasses. Oh, we've got nobody from this row at the back. Anybody? Okay, ask.
So once somebody is gone a little bit of graduation and all that.
Question.
Question is that once is the graduation, the post-graduation and all that has got probably relevance in present day era, because skills are becoming so diverse and so multiplying and so changing. So whether the university professors are able to catch up in a formal education environment.
Should I take this? Yeah. So, one of the things I've learned living in the UK is that it is a very fluid labor market. It almost doesn't matter what your first degree is. You can convert to law, you can start medicine 3 years later, you can go into the city, it doesn't matter. What employers look for is curiosity, able to write, analytical skills. The university gives you a set of transferable skills. We do that very well. We are not teaching you skills for particular industries. We are teaching you skills for being employable. And employers have to recognize and hire people according to that.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to wrap this more because I have another session that I have to go and moderate. Thank you all. Please join me in thanking these wonderful speakers. Everybody thinks education is boring. Education is exciting. It is our future. And we need to invest enough time and energy to dialogue this, which is the reason every year we try and do at least one session that looks at education. Professor Santiago, Professor Somak, Full Professor Mukulika Banerjee, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you.